Welcome to this webinar. Today's edition, we are going to discuss design thinking and digital. It's going to be a very exciting discussion. We are not going to touch upon the two topics, but we'll talk about our experiential learnings and how it is applied to things that we do today. So first of all, I'm your host, Pritam Jaipuriyar. I'm a vice president at Doyensis, 25 plus years of experience. I have been fortunate to work in many different industries and have acquired a very diverse experience. I worked in manufacturing, I worked in IT, I worked in big companies, I worked for very small boutique firms, I worked for Fortune 100 clients and small and medium businesses. I worked as a customer on the other side of the table. Now I'm a vendor partner. Even technology-wise, there is a huge diversity that I acquired. Enterprise applications-wise, it was Oracle, Infor, Dynamics 365, and SAP. And this diversity certainly gives me a unique perspective over the years, around 25 plus years of experience that I had, to look at things with a very experiential perspective. About Doyensis, we are a small boutique firm headquartered in Dallas, Texas. We have development centers in Chennai and Trichy, India. We serve our customers across the globe, and we specialize around databases, backend database, middleware, enterprise applications, and custom development, and even managed services. So our services greatly impacts the customer's top line and bottom lines. And you can learn more about us by visiting us at www.doyensis.com. Now, coming to today's topic and the host for today, we are seeing a different world as of today. Things are changing, and the recent pandemic has added a great blip to all of this. Things are disrupted, they're chaotic, and everyone wants to do things faster, better, cheaper. And our host, James Toomey, I have collaborated with him in the past. He brings in a very different experience about design thinking and digital. We have collaborated in the past, as I mentioned, on a couple of client engagements where we walk the clients through the strategies and the things that they need to do to impact their businesses. The next 45 minutes, we'll have a very open conversation on design thinking and digital. And I will let James introduce himself. Over to you, James.
Hey, Pritam. Hey, everyone. Thank you very much for hosting me. I appreciate it. I think you touched on it. I think it's a really interesting and exciting time as we're trying to figure out what is the role of technology. How do we use it, and how do we make sure we maximize it? I think we've been creating technology so fast that from a design thinking perspective, we're missing the outcomes, we're missing the focus. We're focused on the technology, and really that's what design thinking is. So just to give a little bit about my background, as one would hope, leading a design thinking conversation, I studied design, both undergraduate and postgraduate. This was back when design meant building things. So in the workshop, true industrial design that then evolved into 3D environmental design and what people now talk about digital. And we'll talk about digital transformation. It'll come up later in business transformation. I would honestly say it's the same principles we've been using for over 30 years in design thinking. That's really what it is. I've used these design thinking principles in the more obvious spaces, so product design and communications. But I've used design thinking to build brand new brand strategies, to help organizations change their brand strategy. We've used it in business strategy. I mean, I think now what we're seeing, and I think this conversation is a real signal to that, is design thinking has a seat at the table. We see, again, if you think about design thinking and digital being very similar thinking, we're seeing whether it's a Deloitte, whether it's Accenture, whether it's a Roche or a pharmaceutical company, design thinking has really got a seat at the table. So as of that, over the past 10 years, we've used it a lot around innovation for digital. Really, I worked for Novartis for a few years, so this is a hardcore pharmaceutical company. So both in the prescription, the RX space, as well as the packaged goods. And then obviously more recently in enterprise software. You mentioned Info, that's where you and I met. I led a design thinking group within that organization that was really designed to evolve how people think. We talk about particularly when we think about cloud computing, this idea of best practices, industry best practices. We know we've got to do that quicker, faster, smarter. But we're also, as we're looking at the industry, it is changing quicker than we can keep up with. If we just focus on the optimization, we're going to miss the whole transformation. So we talk a little bit about best practices. Yes, that's quicker, better, faster for the bottom line. But what's the transformation? Optimization is not enough. What's your transformation strategy that you can be different, unique on the top line? And I think that's a really interesting topic. And I know we're going to touch about a little bit. So I'm excited to be here. I am UK born and bred. I think most people can tell by the accent. I came over.
Oh, James, we did not know that.
Yeah. Well, I try and keep it. I came here in 2001, and I live in New York City with my wife and child. So you mentioned the pandemic. Obviously, this past couple of years, New York got hit pretty hard. It's bouncing back. I was with a customer a couple of days ago, and the amount of young people moving into cities now is accelerating. For the past 20 years, we've been told how older people are getting back into the cities. Now young people are really coming back in. So I think it's going to be really interesting, this new workforce, how we've got to think about design, digital first. Feature functions, they don't care about that. The coding is for an output. So we think there's going to be a big uptake in design thinking. And again, appreciate you guys inviting us to have this conversation. So I think if I can, I'll just probably dive straight into it. We've got a couple of topics that we're just going to talk through. And again, we've not done too much preparation by design because the whole thing was to have this conversation. But let me share a couple of slides and it'll just keep us going through. And again, these are just from what I am seeing as I look across the different industries. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Excellent. So first, we talk about leveraging digital and design thinking to drive deeper engagement. Why do we do that? It's about value. I mean, that's the biggest outcome. That's what we are all doing. Now, I'm a big believer in design thinking. You cannot get value unless you engage, unless you get more people thinking and helping collaborate and solve the problem, explore the new opportunities. So what we talk about, again, it's been called design thinking. It's been called digital transformation. It's been called business transformation. It's been called the metaverse universe, whatever we're calling it. That's what we want to do, is just really focus on the value and the outcomes. And I would argue that technology has got so big, it's got so expensive that we've started focusing on the technology and not the outcomes. So first topic, and we're just talking about today's dynamics. And again, don't worry, guys, we're not going to PowerPoint you to death. We're just going to use a couple of slides here and there just to frame it. And I'm actually going to challenge you, Pritam. I'll put it straight back onto you. The inflection point. Every couple of years, we seem to be at an inflection point, particularly when it comes to business processes and digital. This obviously is a big one. We're coming out of the pandemic, but every couple of years, there seems to be a new one. And every couple of years, we'll come back and we'll write who are the winners, who are the losers, and who are those who held the breath and just waited to see how it goes. So I truly do believe 2022 is a new inflection point, but it's not the first one. And I'll push it back to you to kick us off. What do you think, and what are you seeing?
James, you're right. This is certainly not the first inflection point, right? We have lived this industry for decades now. And I personally started around the Y2K, the apocalypse that was supposed to happen in the year 2000. And I would say that was the first inflection point in our IT industry, right? We started learning things, we started making changes to the software, we made it work. And then my observation has been that we slowly achieved a sense of maturity in terms of delivering software projects. The models changed. It was waterfall in around 75, in the 70s. Then we started talking about the Agile Manifesto in the year 2000, so almost 30 years later. And now, 20 years down the line, we are in 2020 now, we have started talking about digital. Digital was introduced almost 10 years back. So the pace of change is faster. We are going to hit these inflection points at a much faster pace than we had ever imagined, right? At a time when I thought that we were maturing in our software delivery, with the cloud coming into the picture, I see a lot of customers lagging behind the deliverables. Projects are getting delayed. We don't have a control. We are over budget, over schedule, over scope. So something's going on. And on top of that, you add all of these uncertainties and the disruptions. So I would say, yes, it is a big, big, big point of time where we are at an inflection. Yes.
Well, I also think I saw some data last year, I think it was, around the success metrics and expectations coming out of these big transformation projects are candidly insanely low. Most other industries wouldn't think about this, but I think the industry has created this norm that we might go too far and it might go over budget. And again, because of that, we end up focusing on the feature functions. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but that's really important. But it's the outcome. It's why we're doing this. And these projects they can go on so long. And I think it's scaring a lot of customers. And very candidly, there's some very large players who make this huge monolithic project that can go on for years and years and tens of millions of dollars. And it can actually slow down the project. And I think I think we've seen customers become scared of it. This like idea, oh my God, it's no longer great, let's get this done. It's like, oh, how much is it going to go over? How long is it going to last? And what will I get the outcomes? I think
James, on that point, I would like to highlight as to what has really happened. Well, we are adopting these new changes and we have great methods and tools and accelerators and concepts, right? Digital and design thinking. They are really, really great. And we are able to build a very good strategy and a vision, but it is the execution where we are seeing it kind of falls through the cracks. So my observation has been that it's the connection, the link between the strategy and the execution, which needs attention and which really needs babysitting, so to say, to bring things under control.
Well, it's also the idea of, I mean, we've got to acknowledge the fact that we've got to get out of the IT group, haven't we? I mean, this is not IT anymore. This is business transformation. What I've seen is that some companies, they keep it on the back end, and it's like, no, don't worry about this. This is an infrastructure play. Don't you worry about it. But it's not anymore, is it? I mean, the data is connecting every part of it. So we've got to bring the business guys in, because at the moment, if we're not careful, the business guys are actually, I don't want to say against it, but they're not involved in it. They're like, why is it so much money? Why is it so much cost? And why aren't we doing that already? And I feel like
gone are the days when we talked of IT project. All of it is a business project now, and business has to be thoroughly engaged right from the beginning.
Yeah, this is not infrastructure. This is growth. This is business. So that leads nicely into, let me just share the next topic then, because that leads very nicely. So I will challenge that we need to rethink and get refocused on the outputs, not the inputs. We start with the output in mind. There's a reason to do this. And let's be honest, it tends to be a couple of triggers. Either we are seeing that the industry is moving faster without us, a competitive threat. It could be a new next generation thinker coming into the organization saying, let's just modernize it. But we start with why we're doing it. But then we spend so much time on the inputs that we sometimes forget the outputs. So again, this is, if you think about design thinking in its purest, I'd say this one statement: start with the end in mind. Don't focus on today small incremental changes. What are we doing on the output? I would challenge that there's too many people that are focusing on the tech. The tech is essential. It's 100% essential. But by doing that, we can sometimes lose focus on the outcomes. So I feel like we start with the outcomes. That's why we're doing it. Somebody says we want something better. And sometimes that's efficiency, bottom line, faster, quicker, better. But then when we get into the meat of it, and by the time we've even kicked off the project, we're so focused on the technology, these feature functions, that we lose those outcomes. So true design thinking, and again, I will challenge this, is how do we keep that all the way throughout the process? How do we make sure that this next gen CIOs, who again are not tech focused, they want to make it about the outcomes. How do we make sure we focus on not the next 12 months of deployment, but 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, the outcomes and what's next? So that's at least what I'm seeing is, again, we start off with the end in mind, but then the minute we get going, we go very micro and very day to day. I don't know what you're seeing.
No, the end in mind is very important. And this reminds me of an anecdote. We always think of end in mind as the CEO or the CIO's parameters that they need to define, right? Yep. I personally think it has to be with everyone, even in the lowest rung, our software engineers and developers. They also need to understand what is the end goal of it. I mean, they do not contribute directly to the growth of the revenue of the company. It is unfair to expect that. But how is that linking to their personal goals and KPIs and objectives? And I'll give you one very nice story that I kind of observed in the mid 2000s, I would say. It was around 2005, 2006. We were working with a client in Pittsburgh. And it was an old mainframe system, a Supra, Mantis kind of a system that we were managing. One of our the experts on the mainframe, I will change his name and the customer's name as well, because I've not spoken to them, but I'll be talking about it. So Jack was managing that system, and I had gotten an alert that was a critical problem in production, and you guys, it was escalated to me. So I had messaged Jack, and Jack was on top of the job. So when I entered the office around 8 a.m. in the morning, I hear him on the phone talking to another person and narrating, do you understand how important this is? You've got to calculate the weight very properly. It has to be accurate. And if the weight is not calculated properly, you are going to kill a person. And he repeated that. You're going to kill a person if the weight is not calculated properly. I overheard him. And I at that point of time, I did not react, but it was intriguing. I was amused as to why is he saying that? And then after a couple of hours, around 10:30, 11-ish, we meet in the break room. And Jack said, we took care of that. It's done. It's resolved. And production is working fine. It's up and running. And customer is happy. I said, great. That's great. But let me ask you one thing. Why do you talk about someone getting killed? What was the real deal over there? And who were you talking to? And he said he was talking to a person in offshore in Chennai, a software developer. And he said the weight calculation was very critical. And they were talking about a shipment weight, which a crane had to lift. And if that weight calculation is not done properly, a person will really get killed. The boom of the crane will not be able to accept that weight. It will break and it may kill person in the shop floor. And that is why I was telling him, be very sure about the calculation, otherwise you may end up killing a person. I wanted him to do the negative test. Instead of telling him directly, I'm enforcing on him the outcome and the output that I wanted. And that to me is a great example of an outcome in mind-based mindset. It's more of a mindset.
And that'll also get people excited, because I mean, that's not excited, killing, not, but saving people. But that's what people want to do, isn't it? They want to go and they want to help move better in this. It's a crane, and they want to make sure we save people's lives. Nobody wants to get excited about moving a crane from this angle to this angle. It's what it's all about. Amazon do this really well, and it's an old trick that's been around. But I know Amazon use it. The idea of we call it the publication article. That as they kick off any project, it's a design thinking workshop, and we all come in with, or you write it while you're there, is what in 2 or 3 years do people say about this? That's the outcome. So in your case, it's hundreds of lives saved and construction accelerated. That's the outcome. But for 2 years, people don't think about that. So that's what we've got to do. And we talk about that in the design thinking workshop. Now we create the publication, the headlines. And when we have our war rooms, we keep them in the front. So when people walk in, they realize that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm doing every single person. There's a very famous story. Who knows if it's true or not, but about NASA in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And they were losing the space race. So they came in, they got together, and they said that we have only one focus in the world, and that's put a man on the moon. They printed out a picture of the moon and put it on every single person's desk. And said, if you're not putting a man on the moon today, go home. The very famous story is JFK was supposed to be walking through at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he bumped into a janitor. He said, hey, what are you doing here? And he said, his reply is, have you not heard, Mr. President? We're putting a man on the moon. Everybody knew what the goal was. Everybody knew what the outcome was. Nobody was saying, why am I here today? It's to check off these 20 things. So we've got to be more inclusive. We've got to bring the business folks in. We've got to make sure the CIOs are connected to that. The CEO and the CFO and the COO. So many times, they're just not part of this. And again, it's a big decision made. And then it turns into, okay, this is try and do it. And are you doing waterfall? Are you doing agile? And again, I mean this in the most respectful, nobody cares. We've got to do that. It's insanely important, but it is not the goal. It's not the end point. And as we see the mass migration of young people leaving, they don't want to be thinking about the day-to-day. They want to understand, why am I doing this? What's in it for them? We've got to reframe this around why we're doing it, who we're doing it for, and why we're doing it. So if I can, I'm going to move us on because I want to make sure we do check off a couple of different things. So our next topic, that leads us to this idea of the business you and I are in. We're not running the businesses. We're going and helping people run the business. So a big thing that I think about is, again, and it's a little bit off our last topic, is the technology and innovation. That's tend to what we talk about. Very candidly, sometimes we get too focused on the technology and we lose sight of innovation, but that's maybe a topic for later today. But the minute we are just thinking about this as this siloed project, we are not doing our customers justice because they're wrestling with so much more. And I think what we've seen is we thought that this idea of the business proposition and the engagement go-to-market strategy and the brand strategy and the tech, we thought it was coming together, but it's actually been going apart more and more. And I will challenge that as more people work remotely, if we do not manage this, it will stay going further and further apart. I know we get a lot of efficiencies, we're working remotely, but bringing people together is key to us. And this is what I think it's our role as consultants to bring that outside thinking in. Our clients always know their business better than we do. But I challenge us, and I challenge all of us to, we are the ones that can bring these disparate topics together and focus on this value creation from the different types. Now, obviously, we've got our areas of expertise. But if we're not careful, we allow them to be segmented. We end up saying, this is the IT working project. We'll have all different people coming in, but we never bring these guys back into the table. I would challenge, again, we need to kick off with big, bold, ambitious workshops. We need to get people to focus on it. But then over the weeks, months, and sometimes years, we need to make sure we bring all these people together and remember what that input is. So this idea of how do we do it as consultants? How do we push this value creation and make sure everyone else stays involved? I'll shut up and that's what I'm seeing. And that's a key thing I'm being asked to do, is by IT people and technology people, bring the business in. And I will also say, once they're in, they love it, because now we demystify this infrastructure back end. So
yeah,
I'll put it back
James,
to you.
I think the vendor customer partnership, it's certainly very important in this age to have a strategic partner. And relationships can be different types. You can be very tactical with them, you can be collaborative, or you can be strategic. Now, many a times we play a very crucial role, right? We support the mission critical applications. We are designing, which has to be last for the next 10 years, maybe, an enterprise application. Sensitive data, security, regulatory, so many things, right? And what we as an IT service provider can be a strategic partner But many a times, what I have observed is while the customer expects us to be strategic partner to them, they tend to be seeking, expecting us to play the order taker role. I think it's fine, nothing wrong with it as long as you get the work done and you are meeting your objectives. But my fear is maybe you're missing the bus. Maybe there's a lot that you can extract in terms of value from your vendor. They bring flexibility of skill sets. They have worked in multiple industries. They have learned a lot. And I have seen there is too much of a focus on the technology selection, the product selection, the process selection, and stuff like that, but very little on the provider selection. How much did you dive deep into understanding your service provider? What is the due diligence you conducted to understand as to how deep it is? Is it just a thing that they are saying they will do, or have they done it in the past? What is the experience that they bring on the table? What are the experts that will be working on? And many a times the evaluation results in experienced people. Yeah, 10 plus years of experienced people means what? So you have to evaluate it very carefully, understand the short-term and long-term goals and objectives and impact of it. And certainly a key thing to get into a strategic relationship with a partner so that they help you in your business outcomes.
I totally agree. I would say it's a key role for us to play as an instigator and an agitator, not just an order taker and an executor. Which again, we can't underplay, the magnitude of these projects. They have to go well. There is no doubt about it. But we'll talk about roadmaps later on. But again, it's our job, I think, to push back's not the right word, but at least push a bit too far and say, well, what if this? What if that? Because we're working across different industries, across organizations. And I think that's what we've lost sometimes. Sometimes I feel like you can get, particularly when it's on a deployment, we can castrate people's opinions. They've been doing this a long time, but it's no, we've just got to do it. And again, it's whether it's Six Sigma and a lot of these things, they can actually stop the idea of us changing and pivoting. We learn as we go. I mean, that's what we talk about agile and being iterative. But yet we have to say we have to be so rigid and focus on this. Businesses change, customers change, learnings change, and everything else. And again, design thinking is truly bringing the people together. I read an article today. Everyone talks about, Simon Sinek start with why. And it was a great article today, and we practice this. It's the why is great, but also the who. Who are we talking to? How can we learn from them? How do we bring those experts in together? And the who has to be bigger. The who has to go outside of just the normal people doing the normal things. Because all we're going to do, all companies are going to do is keep up with what they know. And if we've seen anything from the last 10, 15 years around startups just disrupting everything, and then we've seen everything from the last 18 months, business as usual, quicker, better, faster is not enough. And this is what I constantly talk about with my customers. Sometimes you want to create friction. We talk about, it's a frictionless world. And you know what? If you're Amazon, it probably should be. That's great because you're one click away. The rest of us are not Amazon. When do we create friction that creates value? It shows people that this is what we do that nobody else can do. So I don't mean friction to slow you down, but friction to create value. And I think this idea of value friction is a really interesting thing. If you are only trying to be better, quicker, cheaper, faster, you're never going to beat that. Amazon's going to beat us. And even if you're not in the Amazon industry, someone else can always be better, quicker, faster. When do you actually want to stop and engage someone, get a customer, get a vendor to actually stop and look at this and say, this is really interesting. This is a value creator, not just a friction remover. And I think that's where I think brand and design thinking, everything else is really coming together. Because people roll their eyes at brand, but it's your reputation. What do you want your reputation? Even if you're a B2B vendor, that you think it's all transactional. Every time they deal with you, you're creating your reputation. You're creating a bit more why they want to use you instead of your competitor. We lose that.
James, there are customers out there who do use vendors and suppliers as great partners. And I have seen examples of that. I mean, they derive and maximize the value that they get. And the ones who are very, very successful in what they want to do are the ones who put their vendor very strategically in their ecosystem. I mean, it's a mind shift change for a lot of customers, but that's been my observation. I've seen them deriving a lot of value from vendors.
You've got best practices is not enough. It won't differentiate you from your competition. You've got to create next practices. And that's where we need people such as the answers to come in and challenge, not just say yes, truly.
I will call it the smart practices, the smart practices of the future.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree, Prim. It's, otherwise we're just trying to compete on sameness. And we just can't do that. That will lead us nicely into our next topic. So and a lot of these are overlapping by design. Because I will challenge that. So we go into a customer, they know the business better than we do. There's no doubt about that. They might not know some nuances, but they know their business, obviously. But we get challenged often to think about this section, your operations and assets. 100% essential. There's no doubt about it. But if we look at every one of those companies that has accelerated past the industry norms, they've never stopped there. They've said, how do we connect it to the rest of the ecosystem? So in retail, you've got the idea that it doesn't even go through a retailer anymore. It goes from your operations and assets straight to your customer. I mean, look at Nike and Adidas, what they're doing. The network effect, the idea that you've got so many people on that network that sometimes you can bypass traditional processes. And then how do you unleash people, both to keep them, because again, we know people are walking out in a crazy time at the moment, but also empower them. Well, the data fabric and networks are just huge all over the place. We have to think beyond what we're being asked to do. I think it's our job as consultants. And again, in a good way, not a bad way, but we can't just think here anymore. We've got to bring all the people in and start to look across. So I'll ask you, Pritam, I'll put it back onto you. When you are doing an operations business and an operations efficiency, how willing are your customers to talk about their customers, to bring some of the business leads in or the go-to-market leads, to bring some of the HR people in or some of the vendors into the, are our customers willing to have this big conversation with us? And if they're not, how do we challenge them so that they do?
In my experience, I have certainly seen that with one customer. I was fortunate enough to work with them. And we were talking about their customers. And we were trying to create some synergies, bringing my customers' customers on the table for discussion so that we complete the value chain. It doesn't make sense if you make a project successful for the customer. They are very efficient. They maximize their operations, but the customers are not getting benefited, right? And that is a time when you will want, if that customer's customer happens to be in your network or in whatever ways you can influence, bringing them on the table for a discussion or bringing them in the flow always helps. So that I would say is the next stage design when you are designing, when you're trying to delight not your customer, but your customer's customer. That should be a paradigm shift, I think.
And if you want to be a partner, that's the only way to do that. Your customers not enough, it's who's their customers. I've got two examples. I did a workshop with about 30 people. This was pre-pandemic, as a lot of things were. I asked them to name their customers. And it was mostly IT folks. They named industries. They could not name a single customer, either by personal name or company name. Because after they did the efficiency, it then went to the distribution, the warehouse, and the logistics and got sent out. They did not know what their product was being used for or by whom. I worked with a very large paper manufacturer out of Atlanta, so anyone who knows that area will know what I'm talking about. They did the total opposite. They brought everybody in. What could have been a very short announcement of this is what we're doing. They brought all the different groups in. We had a group CIO there. There was a truly next-gen CIO. And he said, I want everyone to understand why we do this, what our customers are being used for, what they're using this product for, and how we can create more value to them. If everybody does not know who they're making this for, then they're not doing their job. And I think we forget, so many people don't know that. And these guys are innovators. These guys were innovating for decades. We talk about a CIO, finally the cloud can make them innovate. The CIO and the back-end guys, they've been hacking stuff together and making things work for decades. They knew their customers, sometimes by name, because they were getting close to them. We put so many processes, so much between the people who are at the back end making this and the end customer, that we're allowing people to forget it. We've got to bring them into the fold and allow them to solve for it. And again, it's that smart practice or the next practice. That's what's going to create that loyalty. Everyone, every day we have to think who's going to come and take our market share. And candidly, I think a lot of the time with IT projects, people aren't thinking like that. They're thinking we've got to execute here.
And James, to that point, the good thing is everything about digital has customer at the center, right? Everything is about the customer. If it doesn't touch the customer, doesn't impact the customer, I think it's not truly a digital program.
100%. And again, I will challenge our teams, but I'll challenge our customers. And I think it's our job to challenge our customers. People are not thinking like that again. And again, I think technology has become so expensive and such a big deal that we just get our blinkers on. And it's all about agile sprints and making sure we check off every single box. And candidly, sometimes it's a bunch of consultants just trying to burn hours and it's not what it is. And this is what I love about Dance is you guys you're not in the I'm trying to sell more SaaS business. You guys are in the how do we get those better outcomes business. And whatever project's needed next, that's what we need to focus on. So how are we doing on time? A couple more minutes. Let me share a couple more topics because I think they're worth it. So I'd say also, how do we seek out growth areas? So this is what we tend to focus on. We know there is a trend with this. Technical debt is getting so big that no longer is people thinking why cloud or why modernization. It's the biggest thing is why today. I think everyone knows the reasons why. We've just got to give them a reason why today. And again, if this past 18 months has not given them that reason, or the competitive startups that are just coming out of anywhere, then they'll never do that. But process optimization for efficiency. I don't know if we always do a good enough job, or the industry does a good enough, let's say the industry, around the differentiation, the transformation. That's what I think's really interesting. And I'll just go on to the next topic because I know we want to make sure we've got time for Q&A. Because then, so what I'd say is then this idea of we've got our project that we're doing today. And normally that project is put in a box and we're asked to go and help do that. The CEO is not excited about that project. He's trying to do the transformation project. That is a stepping stone to that. I think it's our job is to start to bridge those stepping stones. And I think we can do it better than anyone. Or even if we can't do it, then we can be part of that team that can do it. Because I think it's really, really important. And we tend to think, no, this is huge business planning. A McKinsey might have to do this or something like that. But if we're not doing our job of going in and saying, okay, what else are you planning of doing this? Once you've got this efficiency engine, that you're quicker, better, faster, more reliable in the cloud, what else are you doing? And we can navigate, we can help our customers navigate through this. We can understand, I mean, we've all done this, what are the projects that are coming? Why are you doing this to what's next? And we can help them map this on. This does not have to be a $2 million, 2-year project. It's our job to go and do this because no matter where we do, this is going to be a work in progress. But I will challenge us, say it's our job to not think about today's efficiency foundation. It's to look at their business moves, their strategic growth products. Is it new products? Is it a new service? Is it a new partnership? Is it a new business model? We've got permission to do that. I think our customers want us to do that. They want us to elevate ourselves to that level, be bigger, bolder, more strategic. But we often just get to order taking, as you said, and we forget the why we're doing this. So that was a little bit of a rant, but this is maybe, I think, the biggest opportunity for this industry. The fact that if we're not having these strategic investments beyond today, then we're not doing our customers justice.
And translated to execution, James, I'll simplify it because you're the dreamer, you paint the picture, right? And we are the people who convert those dreams to realities, make it work on the ground, right? So when I translate this, what it essentially means is the ability to prioritize and say, what is it that you want to do today? What should be done today? What should be done next? And what should be done in the future? And that has to be wrapped around. And I believe it's an evolving process that an organization has to follow. It just cannot be a siloed project where I'm doing it because I was told to do it. I mean, even today, I hear so many clients telling me, why are you doing this? And they will tell me, Pritam, it's just a technical upgrade. It's just I mean, the answer is accurate, it's correct, but I think it requires a paradigm shift in the way we are looking at technology. Most likely you are doing that just the technical upgrade to take care of threats, to enhance your security, to enhance your dependence on the software, right? Be within the support frame. It's not just a technical upgrade anymore. And we have to get into that frame of mind when we are thinking about it.
I totally agree. It's this idea again, it's our fault if we just turn this into an upgrade project. I think it's and some customers and clients, they're never going to do anything different, you know. So, but most of the time they are looking for something else. We know that technical debt is driving why they're doing this. There's an economic reason, but we also know that the chances are they've tried and failed at innovation so many times. I'm working with a customer where we're actually trying to do an analysis of how many digital dollars have you spent over the past few years who never made it to fruition. And one of the reasons is our hypothesis, because they never looked at that roadmap. A CEO who never used to be interested in IT, you know, it's just it's a budget. The CEO now realizes it's digital, so they want to do it. So I think some of those things are being pushed down, and there's almost innovation gone wild. Sometimes we talk about there's not enough, but sometimes everybody says, well, I've got to do a small innovation digital project. It's on my objectives. But again, you guys are the technical people. Again, to your point, you make it a reality. I like to come in and have fun at the stuff. But on a quarterly basis, not on a yearly basis, we should come and say, what's going on? Is this part of one strategic roadmap? Are we helping each other? And sometimes we might have to change how we deploy because we realize a different group's doing something with the open source data that we can leverage. We've got to be able to move as needed. The fact that we get a project and we look at it, we sometimes win on price, not value. Don't even start me on that. And then we go and execute it, and that's it. And it's you bill it. And then I think it's our job, and I think the customers want us to. They've got to now. They've got to be more open-minded and say, look, what else can we be doing? Look beyond your scope. Come together. And again, this is what I like about smaller consultancies that are not trying to. It's not trying to just get another project or anything else. It's saying, look, you've got this investment. We want to get the best outcome. Bring the different vendors and partners together, make them work together, and let us collaborate for those outcomes. We're not competing with each other. It just doesn't happen. There's too many silos. And again, I'll go back to my earlier point, working remotely, we've all proven that, but it's also our job to bring people together, and we can do it digitally these days. We can do it in a room, however we need to do that. But I think that's our responsibility, to give the customers more out of what they do. What are those strategic moves above and beyond just our project? Let's make sure we're taking those into account, even when it's sometimes not in our own P&L, but we say, look, we think this is the right decision for you, and then push to others that are just trying to run off with their own agenda. So a bit of a soapbox, but I would say our customers want us to elevate our game. They want us to raise the conversation, to bring other people into it and help them solve, not just help them execute.
And James, that goes to the core point of digital, right? And let me ask you this question now that we covered all the points that you had to cover, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So digital means different things to different people. And there is no right or wrong definition, right? We tend to kind of sometimes undermine it by saying, oh, it's a buzzword, it's a jargon, without getting into it. But I always ask, what does digital mean to you? So to you, James, what does digital mean to you?
Prim, you didn't tell me you were going to ask me that at the last minute. You could have given me a heads up.
I didn't want to ask you about the subject.
No, I mean, I think that the simplest way, and this is not out of my brain, connecting people, processes, and things. I mean, that is but I think that's just the undercurrent. I think that's what people think digital, connecting people, processes, and things. That is really good, big consulting jargon, because you can't argue with it. And it means you have to have a huge network connection project, which costs an awful lot, and a huge consultancy can do that forever. No, you need to make sure connect the people, process, and things so you've got the data. Or you cannot argue with that, and that is where every organization is going. But again, you call it smart practices, I call it next practices, the optimization versus the transformation, the friction by design. And that's, to me, where we've got to, as I speak to customers, that's when we help them understand the penny drops, this idea of optimization to save on the bottom line, differentiation or transformation to create your reputation and grow your top line. There's a million ways, again, to do that, and the people, processes, and things in the middle. But I think if that's a framework that you can get organizations horizontally to share behind, it's at least something that we can all start to have the conversation and then say, well, how do we deprioritize something? How do we prioritize something? How do we make sure we put the investment in there? So to me, that's it, is best practices, optimization, cloud. You guys can talk about that way better than I can. But I don't.
And I always try to put it in context so that people get an idea. And many times what is happening is we explain these things to people without the context, and giving a perspective and a context always helps. I would say if you look at the evolution, early days when we started automating or computerizing, that was the term being used. It was all about submitting a printed report to the CFO. There used to be the perforated paper. I remember first job, my job was to put the paper in the machine and ensure that the printout report is good.
And the print had to be in its own room because it was so loud. Yeah.
Yes. So that is how it was. And that was called computerization. When you had a computer maintaining your inventory and you printed the output in a book format and you had the inventory material in a book format, that is what was told to me was computerization, because you entered all the data in the system and there is a PC, the green screen PC taking care of it. That changed to kind of software projects where we started using tools to develop, and that is where I would say transformed to a more structured MIS, information systems. Then it converted to IT, information technology, post 2000, I would say, where we started doing projects. And we always used to talk about the gap with the business. We have to fill that gap. It's not that we were not talking about it. We were doing the IT projects based on what the business wanted us to do. And that was an improvement on information technology, meaning I'm upgrading my access to Oracle database. I'm upgrading my mainframe to a Java application, something like that, right? So that was improvement on the information technology. When we started talking of digital, that is leveraging the IT to make improvements and impact to the business. That is what digital is all about, meaning leveraging the information technology to create a new business stream, a business line, new ways of generating revenue, or even new models of business. So your technology is embedded as part and parcel of your system, right? And
I think as we do these projects, if every person on this project, no matter who they are, is not excited around a new service, a new model, a new way of acting at the end of this project, no matter what it is, if it's the most boring ELP project, no matter what it is, if they're not excited, if it's a HR modernization project, if they're not excited, every single person, about doing something better, I feel that the project has lost its thesis and it's lost its North Pole or kind of key focus. I think that's, again, I think it's our job. We've allowed this industry has allowed this to become a feature function deployment project. It is not. It's not about what a technology does. It's about what it enables. And we've allowed ourselves a lot of the time, we've allowed organizations to not do this, to forget about that. It's going to enable a new wave of business, a new value for our customers, disrupt the value chain, go to our customer's customer, create something new. This can be the most exciting industry. And if we're not careful, we let it become boring. We let it become just a project. And no, that's just beyond, philosophical. That means people aren't focused on the right thing. Nobody wants an ERP. Nobody wants an ERP. It's like saying, good news, you've got a root canal. You do it to solve a problem because you got ear and pain, or to create an opportunity, you want a better smile. The dentist, when you go, the dentist doesn't try and get you all excited. Let me show you all these tools I'm going to stick in your mouth. They say, we're going to solve this problem so you can eat, or you're going to have this great smile. We're focused on these tools that get shoved into our gums, and we're not focused on the other stuff. And again, this next generation CIO, these up-and-comer rising stars, no one wants to get excited about an ERP. The CEO doesn't want to get excited about an ERP. We just want to say that it's absolutely essential, but that will enable what's next. And I think it's our job to do that. And I think the market's right for it. I think people are asking and expecting it. And for those who don't do it, I think we'll start to look old-fashioned.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end. Are there any questions that we need to answer?
We probably scared them all off, Pritam. Everyone's probably dropped off by now.
No, I think we got certain comments. For example, before Y2K, the client-server technology was an inflection point. Yes, yep. To an extent, I would agree. Correct. The client-server was certainly a big change. What you all are saying about business improvements, how is digital transformation different from the earlier business process re-engineering that was done? Very good question, and I would like to take this one. It's not that we were not doing digital transformation in the earlier days, right? It's not invented in the year 2010. It was there, we were doing it in different forms and shapes. For example, when I was an engineer in the shop floor, we used to use CAD/CAM engineering software to create 3D models and to create engineering drawings. I was an electrical engineer, so I would create those drawings to make my life easy so that I don't have to manually make it on a piece of paper and then send it to a draftsman who converts that into a printed format when he used to print it. We use software to bring efficiencies in our own work, and I was using the software to improve my own process of creating engineering drawings, maybe mechanical, or that is what the CAD/CAM was doing. Fast forward, I started using the CAD/CAM software, and it also got better. It started creating 3D models, became more sophisticated, and I was able to create a bill of material. Given an equipment, I was able to tell this part is numbered like this. This is a part number, this is the description, this is the specification, right? And I started connecting it with a database. Now with that, I was able to help a new revenue stream for my customer. I created a service line like parts and repair business, where the 3D model was presented in front of the customer online. The customer used to go through the bill of material, pick that part, identify that and pick that, and order it online. Now, the same software which I was using for my own benefit has gotten better, and I'm using it for creating a new revenue stream for my customers. So that to me is digital. The earlier one was IT. I mean, that is a very simplistic example that I'm giving of digital.
And I think whoever asked the
process...
question, I think they were right. They are right. And again, the IT groups, these guys have been innovators for years. Like this, they've been doing workarounds when things go wrong and everything else. I think if we're not careful, the cloud and everything else can almost, we'll turn them into process people. They shouldn't be. And I think all the consultants shouldn't be. But we get focused. I now challenge it because I say it every single day. We do get focused on feature function, requirements gathering. We go down our own rabbit hole. And I think organizations, they've got bigger and they're more siloed. I think some of I think they've allowed this to happen. I think a lot of the how is, and I think that's something design thinking can do. The bringing people together on a regular basis, getting excited about the problem, making sure we get focused on the outcome. I think some of this is a self-made problem by this industry, that we get so focused on the feature function. We close the doors and don't get to do that. I think everyone, again, I'd love to know how many people across the country are excited about an ERP company. It's not. It looks like it's got risk. They're a bit nervous about it. How do we get them excited to say, no, this is a new, better way of doing business? And I think that's where just like the idea of doing workshops, bringing people together on a regular basis, going beyond just kind of the updates to really make sure we focus on it. I think we can do it. It's not going to be easy, but I think a lot of people will also then realize that they're not getting credit for what they're already doing. And I think the business side want to be involved, but we keep them at arm's length.
And in digital, it's extremely important to have the business involved, right? I mean, without their engagement and involvement, we just cannot connect our strategy, our transformation, and our people together. And these things have to be stitched together for the business outcomes that we desire.
I think they want to be involved. I think if we don't, all they do is they see it on an annual report saying, how much are we spending on infrastructure? That's too much. The idea of it's our job to bring them involved, and it makes our job easier and better because we've got more key stakeholders saying, yes, now I realize it. It's not about just modernizing the technology. This will enable us to create a new business model. I've been wanting to do that for a while. This will enable us to disrupt the value chain, to create a service model, to go from product selling to subscription selling, whatever that is. The business, they get kept at arm's length. We need to bring them in and get them as excited as we get.
And James, we are in the last 2 minutes. We may want to wrap this up. I do want to thank all the participants. I hope they enjoyed and they derive some benefits out of this. You want to wrap up, James?
No, just thanks everyone for listening. And again, I think there's a lot of it is not the what, it's the how. And I think that's where I've learned design thinking. Again, I went into a big technology industry that I didn't grow up in, but just realizing that start with the end in mind, get people to workshop the outcomes, get people excited about, again, not what just the technology does, but what it can enable. I think we are leaving excitement and people and money and all that on the table. And I think it's our job to go and fix it and get everyone excited. So thank you very much for inviting me. Good to see you.
Thank you, everyone. And next step, if anyone of you interested to talk to us or discuss in depth about design thinking or digital, more than happy to help you understand that and more than happy to discuss with you. So any questions, feel free to shoot an email to us. We'll get back to you. Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good day.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, James.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.